If you are a fan of true crime, and if you absolutely love crazy stories about murder and death penalty and all that sort of stuff, we absolutely have the story for you today. This is Mystery, and this is MysterE's coming at you with all of the amazing trends in psychology. So here we go. Today, what we have is we have the story of Scott Panetti. Most of you have never heard of this dude before. His story, you cannot make this up. It is filled with so much unbelievable stuff that your jaw will drop. Okay. This will be 10 minutes of you thinking, okay, for this guy. I mean, it is crazy, right? So, interesting use of terms, by the way. So, Scott Panetti, born back in the early 60s, right? And from Wisconsin originally, was a successful student, doing pretty well in high school, athlete, football player, some mental health crises. And we're not talking just small ones. We're talking just some really, really difficult stuff. Auditory hallucinations, incredibly bizarre delusions, which if you're new to psychology, those are going to be just these false beliefs and bizarre thought patterns that just cannot be true. Just absolutely hugely paranoid delusions, thinking that the devil was after him, just like just in the throes of what we call a psychotic break. And again, a psychotic break is not some sort of I'm going to kill you like I'm a psycho. A psychotic break is actually a psychological term for when people are unable to tell what's real from what's unreal. So what they're going to be experiencing there are these hallucinations and delusions. And Scott had these. And he was hospitalized in the 80s through the early 90s. He was hospitalized 14 times because of these paranoid delusions, hallucinations, and the like. He ended up getting married, and he ended up having a child. But throughout this entire process, he was riddled with mental illness. Ultimately, back in the early 1990s, he and his family were living down in Texas, where his wife was from and his wife's parents are. So Scott Panetti's in-laws lived down there. And in 1990, Scott was in the throes of, again, these paranoid delusions. And he ended up shaving his head, putting on military fatigues, getting in his car, driving to his in-laws, Amanda and Joe Alvarado, driving to their house, taking a shotgun, killing both of them, driving back to his home, where his wife was with their baby, and he took them to a bunker in the house where Scott was living, and he held them hostage there for several hours. He finally let them go. He put on a suit, and he turned himself in. So he brought himself to the police station. What you're going to hear during this story is you're going to hear parts of what it's like at the time of the crime and how insanity is measured, not only in the state of Texas, but throughout the United States. And we're also going to discuss competency. Competency is your state of mind at the time of trial, or your state of mind, in this case, while you're serving your time in prison. And we'll get to that in a couple minutes. Scott turned himself in the throes of massive delusions and hallucinations. He's not well. A couple psychiatrists come in. They say he's not competent to stand trial, which again means he's not able to help himself in his own defense. This is a constitutional right that we have. But the psychiatrist said, no, he's not competent. The judge says, no, I think he is. And he decided that it was okay for Scott Panetti to stand trial for capital murder. So during this time of Scott's life, he was imprisoned, and he had a moment where he believed that his lawyers were out to get him. And he called this his born again April Fool. So he believed that his attorneys were out to get him. So he decided that he was going to act as his own defense. So here you have Scott Panetti, paranoid schizophrenic, in the throes of hallucinations and delusional thinking, being his own attorney. So it goes to trial. I kid you not. This goes to trial. One of the witnesses is a friend of his, said that Scott believed that he was portraying a part in some sort of alternate reality, that he didn't even really understand the nuance of what was happening with the trial. So much so that, get this, the judge allowed this to happen. He called Jesus Christ to be one of his witnesses. This is 1992, he called JFK to be one of his witnesses. He called Anne Bancroft, who's some actress from back then, to be one of his witnesses. And then he just called a bunch of friends that he hadn't talked to in a while. He dressed up like a 1930s cowboy. Okay. And again, he wasn't making fun of the court proceedings. This was a guy that was in full-blown psychotic break from reality, dressed up in cowboy boots, a purple suit, a big 10-gallon hat, whatever, like just playing this character, right? And the judge allows all of this to happen. You might be shocked to hear this, but Scott didn't win his case. He was found guilty. Shocking. And so all of this was happening. He was found guilty of capital murder, and then he has to go to the penalty phase. So he's all these jurors in there, and he's still playing this character. And the jury was so freaked out by him, they were afraid that he shouldn't ever be let out because he was so sick. So they sentenced him to death. So at the time of the crime, when you look at the not guilty by reason of insanity plea, you have to be unable, at the time of the crime, unable to tell what's right from wrong. And at the time of the crime, it couldn't be premeditated. Well, it was premeditated. He planned it out. He grabbed the shotgun. He went to his in-laws' house with the full knowledge that he was going to kill them. He knew that he did something wrong because, how do we know that? Because he turned himself in. There you go. He acknowledged that what he did was wrong. So the insanity defense goes out the window. But now we have this other piece with competency and the competency to stand trial. And many people think that at times competency leads to defendants being able to be found not guilty by reason of insanity. But it's two completely different pieces. Insanity is at the time of the crime. Competency is at the time of the trial. So in both cases, in these cases, at the time of the crime, Scott Panetti was legally sane. And at the time of the trial, they deemed that he was competent to stand trial. Now, there are obviously questions of whether he was competent to stand trial or not. Big time questions. So now, just so you have an idea, he's been on death row since 1990. This whole time that he's been on trial, it's never been mandated that he takes his meds, and he refuses to take those. And the whole time that he's been on death row, he believes that he is on death row for preaching the gospel to other prisoners. So he was sentenced, and they set a date for execution. And the date for execution was, I forgot it offhand, was around 2000. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled 5-4, saying that no, you need to be competent to be put to death. The reason why you need to be competent to put to death is you ask the question, what is the purpose of putting somebody to death if they don't know why they're being put to death? Are they being punished for something that they really truly know that they did? Well, Scott doesn't know this, but the Court of Appeals got the verdict back from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, take a look at this again. The Court of Appeals, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, looked at, and this is like Texas, Arkansas area. They look at his case and they say he is competent to be put to death because he just simply knows that he is being put to death because he's been accused of murdering two people. So even though he doesn't believe that, and he has no understanding of that, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said that no, he's competent to be put to death. But as of this broadcast, he's still sitting on death row. Now, I wouldn't be super comfortable talking about this and talking about, you know, the issues that Scott's facing. And like, I'm definitely not preaching for his release or anything like that. But his estranged wife, now his ex-wife, has said he shouldn't be put to death. He has no idea what's happening. Like he has no clue. And so it just raises the many questions about insanity, incompetency, and you know, what are we doing here? What is happening here? And it just reminds us how important it is that this competency to stand trial and the competency to be put to death is a piece that we don't know a whole lot about, and we can learn more and more. So if you're interested in this, I highly recommend you just look up Scott Panetti, check out the story a little bit further. There's a lot more details. There are videos, that sort of stuff, but it is a fascinating story that I think at some point in time, somebody is either going to make a documentary about, or they're going to make a movie about this, because it's crazy that something like this can happen in our society. It's crazy. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I want to thank Bear Wade with Unify Creative Agency. I also want you to go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and follow us on Instagram, Facebook. Now the thing is with Twitter, we'll see what happens with with Twitter's good. We'll see what happens with TikTok going forward. So we have that going, but we'll see what happens with that. If you don't know, go ahead and check that out in the local news, in the latest news. But go ahead and follow us on Instagram and Facebook and all that good stuff. Make sure that you follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And hey, I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much.